Okay, I'm recording right now, but actually that's a good time to telling me because I have not started yet, so it's okay. So the first notebook that we'll review is basic pandas load file. Here we will see how we can load a dataset with pandas. Then I have also prepared a notebook for you to learn how to load the dataset from a web API. But I guess we don't need to review it in details during the lab. You can take a look at it later on at home. Because that's probably not something that you do every day, but it could be useful still because sometimes the data sets that you want, I mean, you cannot download them directly, so you should query a web API to, to get the data set. So it's important to know how to do it. And then also, what is also very important is data cleaning, which we will review it in a separate notebook. Once you are done with reviewing these three notebooks, depending on how much time is remaining, I want to also review some of the notebooks in the selecting subset folder, which is basically about how to select subsets of the data from a data frame and how to do indexing and so on. And these notebooks are quite long, and we have got them from a post on Medium. So we are not gonna review all of them during today's lab, but I would highly recommend you to review them at home because these are the basic skills and knowledge that you need to know for working with pandas. Okay. So we'll start with this basic pandas.5. So if you just open it, as usual, we have put the link to open the notebook in Colab. We try to do it for all of the notebooks in the repository. And so we want to learn how to load the dataset into a pandas data frame. So as I said, datasets could be in different formats like CSV or JSON. The first thing that you have to do is that you have to import the pandas package, and you do it by just importing pandas, and you can just give a shorter name to it, so you can import pandas as pd. If you're using Google Colab, obviously you don't need to install the pandas package. Also, for the people that don't use Colab and have installed Anaconda on their computer, they don't need also to install the package, because with Anacondas, when you install Anaconda, you also get lots of different packages, and Pandas is already installed with Anaconda. The first thing that we want to do is to read a dataset which is in CSV format. So here, because we are working with Colab, I'm loading the dataset from GitHub, okay? And the dataset is basically about it's about some information about some, I guess, I think some companies, and in each country and continent there are, and so on. I think it's probably a synthetic dataset. But the important point here is that we are loading it from GitHub. If you are just doing this exercise on your local computer, you can of course load a data set from your local directory. All you have to do is that basically here you should give the address of the directory in your computer. But if there are some other data sets in GitHub that you want to load, the way you can do it is basically, for example, here, the data sets that we are using is in this data folder, okay? So I go there, I found the data set, which is this pandas area, okay? And then I click on the row, okay, to get the row data set. And you can see it's a CSV file, and each column is separated by a semicolon, okay? And if you just copy the link to the raw dataset and paste it here, you can just load the dataset. So yeah, I think I answered this question because basically the raw dataset is the link to the actual CSV file with this specific format. But if you just if you just copy this link, let me just move this to just a second. Okay, if you just copy the link here, this is basically I'm sorry. This is basically the link to this GitHub page. So this is not the link to the CSV format of the data. So you always have to copy the link to the raw data set. And the same for JSON. Doesn't make any difference. Okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Okay, because for the assignment 0, you send us like many different links where we can download some data sets, and one of them was the BFS admin. And on the BFS admin, we could like pretty only download data sets on JSON on a JSON file. And can you show us? Could you show us how can we load a JSON file?
Yeah, I will.
So one that we download on our, for example, desktop.
I mean, it's pretty much the same process. I mean, if the data set is in JSON format, okay, all you have to do is that you have to call read JSON, and then you just give the link. If it is somewhere on the web, you just give the link to the JSON data set. I'm not sure what was what was the situation exactly, and where was the data set, but I mean, you can, for the read JSON, you can also give a URL of the dataset, and pandas can just load the dataset. Yeah, I will go through the delimiters, but yeah, I mean, the important thing is that usually if there is like a link in the website from which you are just taking the data. So usually there's a link to download the dataset. When you click on that link, the dataset will be downloaded automatically. So if you just copy that link and do, pandas read JSON and the link here, most probably it should work.
Okay.
Yeah. But
is there any possibility to load a dataset that we have on our computer without passing by the Google Drive?
I guess you can also, I'm not 100% sure, but I guess, yeah, you can have also the data set in your Google Drive and then load it from Colab as well.
Okay, that wasn't my question, but it's okay.
Yeah, if you want to load the data set from your computer on Colab, I'm not sure if there is a way. There could be a way, maybe I'm not aware of. But yeah, I'm not sure. But you can load a data set on your Google Drive with Colab.
Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, your friend is helping here, so you can just import a file. If you check the chat, okay. So here, if you read the CSV file, and by just so data is basically the data frame which contains this data set. And by doing data.head, I can see the first 5 rows of my data set, okay? Here you can also, as an attribute, you can specify how many rows you want to see. So you can also see first 10 rows of the data set, okay, by just doing data.head 10. Another possibility is that you can you can also check the last, 5 or 10 rows of the dataset by just doing tail, and you will see like the last 5 rows of the dataset. But now you can see that the result that we see doesn't make sense much, because we expected to see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 columns in our data set, but now everything is just in one column, okay? Which leads us to the fact that we have not loaded the data set correctly, okay? And here the problem is really obvious actually, because we can see that in the CSV files, the columns were separated by semicolon, whereas pandas read CSV by default assumes that the separator of your CSV file is actually a comma. So if you just see the small documentation that shows here, you can see that the separator is by default comma, okay? So if you want to load the data set properly, all you have to do is that you have to specify the delimiter. Well, it doesn't matter, I guess, but you can either the delimiter or separator. But you should specify the delimiter to be a semicolon, which is what is being used. And then if you do so, you will see that your data set will be loaded properly. So you will see the 6 columns that you expect to see, okay? But now comes another problem. It seems that the header of your data set is actually a data sample. So this should not be the header for sure, okay? So then what you have to do is that you have to basically tell pandas that don't read the first line of my CSV file as a header, okay? And you can do that by using this attribute, which is called header. So by default, if I can find header here. So by default, pandas infers the header from the data, and sometimes it infers that, okay, the first row is the header, which is wrong in the case of here. So you just want it to not pick the header from your data set. So you can just tell it to put the header equal to just set header as none, okay? And let me just do data.head. And when I set header as none, you will see that now I'm reading the first row of my CSV file properly as well. But now the name of the columns are just integers from 0, okay? Which is still not really good because probably your columns have some names, some proper names. So here, what you can do is that you can actually, if there's some documentation or something for your data set, you can actually specify the name of the columns when you are reading the CSV file and loading the data set. And you can do it like this, okay? And you see here, I did not, again, set header as none because it's not necessary, because when I'm specifying the name of the columns explicitly, so this means that pandas will not take the first row as the header anymore. So by doing that, I have finally properly read my CSV file and load it in a pandas data frame. Okay. So I guess we just reviewed this. So some basic commands. So if you just do it in the notebook, if you just type the name of the data frame and run the cell, it just prints out the whole data set. And at the bottom, you can see you have this amount of rows, 1,795 and 6 columns. And with the head and tail, you can see the first X rows or the last X rows of the data set. You can also use sample to just take a random sample of the data set. I don't know, random sample of 5 rows, let's say. And it just gives you a random sample. You can see that the rows are being chosen randomly. Okay. And then there are 3 main components of a data frame, okay, which are called index, columns, and the data values. Okay.
Actually,
yes.
you know, yeah, I mean, sometimes, you know, they also include the column index equal to 0. So basically, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, because it's changed the number of the columns, I mean, like this. So is it that important?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I got your question. So what do you mean exactly?
I mean, sometimes they also put the column index equal to 0, which basically just to make the names of the rows, I mean.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, is that important or not?
I mean, again, it depends on the data set that you are loading, you know. So, I mean, sometimes you have a CSV file, and that CSV file already contains some headers with the name of the columns. So
I mean, the rows as well, the rows. Okay, I mean, yes.
the rows as well. I mean, sometimes in a CSV file, there is a row index already. So, and
Okay.
when you just load the data set, you have an extra column, because pandas, when you load a data set, add a row index itself. So you end up having 2 row indices. So, I mean, it depends how the data, yeah, it depends on the data set you're loading. So,
Actually, sorry, basic it is the index column 0 equal to 0. It's like this. And index column equal to 0. Okay. I guess not important.
yeah, I mean, maybe you can also check the documentation that for like what is the use of this. So index column. Okay. This is basically if you wanna use one or more column as the row label of the data frame. So basically, for example, here I can use this my date time column as the index of my data frame. So you can also, let's do it right now. Maybe not on this one. You will see what I mean. Okay, that's index column, and let's set it to 0. You see, now we have the date column as the index of my data frame. Did you see what happened?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, you can even, I guess you can even have multi-index. So yeah, you can select 2 or 3 columns as the index of your data frame.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do, okay. So yeah, as I said, the row index is basically the identifiers which identify each row. And usually the row index should be a unique index, because you should be able to identify each row uniquely, okay? And then you have the column index, which identifies a column. So you can have strings. You can have column names as strings, or you can have integers as column identifiers. Usually there are some meaningful strings, because you have some data set and each column means something. And you have the data values, which is basically the value that you have inside the data frame. So for example, at the first row, at the index 1, and in the country column, you have country 7. So basically this country 7 is a data value. Okay. And by doing data.index gives you the index of the data frame. And you can see that it's a range from 0 to 1795. columns are basically the columns of your data frame. It's a list of the columns, and values is just so it's just an array of all of the values in your basically in your data frame. So this is kind of a matrix. If you just do values.shape, you can see that this is basically the shape of the data frame. Okay. This is not really important. This just tell you that they are what type they are, and you can see that when you do data.values, it basically gives you a NumPy array. Okay. Another important thing is that you can actually select a subset of the columns or rows, okay, in your data frame. Actually, we will review it in more details in the selecting subset notebook. But for now, you can just do data country. And when you run this, you will get the column country. But you can see that right now, the type of this output is not actually is not a data frame anymore. It's actually a data type which is called pandas series. If you just do type, you can see that it's a series. Okay, so basically, series is just another type in pandas. And usually, when you have a data frame which contains a number of rows and columns, so each single row and each single column, if you just extract a single column or a single row, it's actually a series. Okay, so you can think of series something similar to a list in Python or just one-dimensional array in NumPy. But for example, here, if instead of selecting only country, I select two columns, for example, country and I don't know, event, for example. Okay, and just run it. I get again an output which is of data frame type. Okay. Note that when I want to select two columns, I just enclose them in brackets. If I don't do it, I will get an error. And the error is that basically there is no column which is called country event. So if you want to select multiple columns of a data frame, you should enclose them in brackets. Another interesting point I want to show you here is that if I just select only the country column, but enclose it in brackets and run it, as a result, this time I will get a data frame and not a series. So these are just, details, but yeah. The other way you can select a column of a data frame is just by doing this dot functionality. So you can just do data.country, and you will still get the values in the country column. Okay. And so this is for selecting the columns. You can also select the rows of a data frame. For selecting the rows of a data frame, you can just simply do, simple indexing, the same as you do for a list or a NumPy array. So if I just do data 0, it will get, well, no. You can just, for selecting the rows of a data frame, you should basically use this either iLook or look, methods. And by using iLook, you are basically able to select a row of a data frame. For example, here I select the first row of a data frame.
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, for example, here the data type is saying object. What does it mean? I mean, basically.
So objects is usually referred for the string data type. So, I mean, when you have a column, when you have basically a column in a data frame, the values in that column could be of different types. So it could be integer, it could be date time, or
Oh, I see. I mean the
yeah.
data inside the values,
Yes,
the
yeah.
values. Okay.
And here the data type is object because all of our columns are string columns. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Or sometimes when you have a column which is a mix of string and and integers and floats and so on, it just says that the data type is object. So when pandas load the column, it assumes that all of the values in this column are just strings. Okay. But if there is a column which contains only integers, sometimes pandas can correctly infer the data type, and just when you load the data set, it correctly identifies that the data type is, for example, integer. Okay, so with this iLook, you can select a row. You can even select a single element of your data frame. So if I just do data look data.ilook 0 and 1, I'm basically getting the value in the first row and in the second column of my data frame, which is basically read. Okay. There is another method similar to iLook, which is called look. And if I want to use look in the same way, I just do 0. And for example, what is the second column name? I don't know, event. Okay. And when I run it, I get the same result. So did anybody notice that what is the difference between look and iLook? So basically, yeah, exactly. So when you use iLook, you should basically use the integer index of your rows and columns. Okay. But when you use the look, you should use the actual index of your rows and columns, right? So, and because here the column index are these string which are called country, event, my date, time, etc. So here for the look, I should use the actual name of the column. So here, if you just give 1, I will get a type error, or I just get an error. Okay. And so that's it. You can also so you will see these functionalities more in the other notebooks in the data set, in the repository, but here we are just doing a quick review. So you can even filter your data frame by one of the columns of your data frame. For example, here, let's say I want to, okay, let's do what is written in the notebook. So let's say I want to select the data samples for which the topic equals Europe, for example, okay? And all I have to do is that I should, right here. So let's do it like this so that you can see everything clearly. So I want to select the rows of my data frame for which topic is equal to Europe. So all I have to do is just, I should write topic, and I want to select the samples for which my data frame in the, oh, I'm sorry, I should write here, data, and I want to filter the rows for which data for column topic is equal to Europe, okay? And when I run it, I will get all of the samples for which topic is equal to Europe. Here you can see that there are only 322 rows for which topic is equal to Europe, okay? Note that when in most of the operations that we apply on a pandas data frame are not in place, meaning that here when I filter my data frame data, I did not actually modify the original data frame. So if I just look at the original data frame again, I can see that it has not changed. Okay. So if I want to apply the changes on the original data frame, I should always assign the output of the operation to the original data frame or to a new data frame. Otherwise, the changes will not be applied. Okay. So here, if I want to change the original data frame and keep only the rows for which the topic column is equal to Europe, I should do something like this. Okay. And yeah, here it says that you can combine multiple selection methods. So for example, first you can just select the first 5 rows of your data frame, and then from that data frame, you can just select 2 columns. And yeah, let's see if we can do the exercises together. So the exercise says that select the user ID, the country, and the topic columns for the user who are from country 2 and show only the first 10 rows. Okay. So here you have the solution here. Okay. Yeah, let's just if you want to think about it a little bit, or if you have any questions for that, maybe you can ask me at this point. Otherwise, I can just explain for you the solution. Okay, so if everybody are okay, I will just explain it quickly. So the question wants us to select the user ID, the country, and the topic. So the first thing that we want to do is basically select these 3 columns. And as I said, because we are selecting more than 1 column, we should enclose the name in a bracket. No, basically when on every Google Colab that you have, you should, well, it's not for pandas, for like every notebook that you start, you should import the packages that you're going to use during that Colab notebook. So that's something that you should do. So you select these first 3 columns. And by doing that, these 3 columns are selected. Okay, what's the next step? For the users who are from country 2, so we want the data of column country 2 be equal, of column country be equal to country 2, and then show only the first 10 rows, which is done by doing head of 10 rows. Okay. And you can see that this is done. So only these 3 columns are selected. For all of them, the country is equal to country 2, and we are only showing the 10 rows, the first 10 rows. Okay, so this was for a CSV file, but sometimes the data sets are not in CSV format. And another popular format for data sets is called JSON, which is very similar to a dictionary in Python. Okay, so here we have a small example to see how you can load a JSON dataset in pandas. The dataset that you want to load is a dataset for city bikes in the New York City. And here you have the link to the dataset. So this part you can just ignore because this is the part that we are just getting the dataset from the URL. This is not in the topic of this session, so you can just ignore it. So okay, I'm not sure what's the problem. Oh, okay, the link is broken. Okay, I did not know that the link does not work anymore. So, okay, so maybe we should just skip this part. But the only thing is that it's really same as loading a CSV. All you have to do is just to do pandas that read JSON, okay? Yeah, I think we will cover this in the cleaning data part, okay? So let's just, so sorry, I did not know that this link does not work anymore because it was working when I just double check everything. So maybe if you want to review this notebook at home, just ignore this, just review it until this, up to this second part. So just ignore this section too. Okay, because there is not enough time, I would probably not review the notebook about loading a data from web API, but you can just review it. It's cool and it's not really long. And I will jump into data cleaning in pandas. So a task which is typically very important when you are working with data is data cleaning. And what we mean by data cleaning is that usually when you have a data set, you are given a data set, and the data set may come from different sources. Sometimes the data sources are not completely reliable. Sometimes there is a human in the middle. For example, there is like a human which is entering the data records, or these kind of problems. And all of these problems can cause the data to be, let's say, dirty and not complete. So sometimes some of the data values are missing, okay? Sometimes the data values are inconsistent or there are duplicates in the data set. So you have two rows which are exactly the same. Sometimes the type of the values in a column are not correct. So for example, in a column, you expect to see date and times, but for some problem, for some reason, one of the data points in that column has an integer value or has a string value, okay? Or sometimes in a column you expect to see only integers, but there are some data samples for which they have a string value for that column. So these are kind of the problems that you have to deal with them, and we refer to this process as data cleaning, okay? So in this notebook, you want to use pandas to see how we can clean a data set. A data set is about building violations from New York City. You can find the data set in this link here. And for this exercise, I'm just working with a subset of this data set, which contains 10,000 records. So I have already got this data set and subsample it. And if you want to use this subsample data set, you can just go to the repository, and then under week 2 data, you can find it as a violation DOV. Okay. So again, we just import the required package, which is pandas and numpy, I guess, for this exercise. And I read the dataset, which is in CSV format, from the raw link in GitHub. Okay. So I can see that my dataset has 10,000 rows and 18 features or 18 columns. And again, by df.head, I can see the content of the first 5 rows of my data frame. So you can see, for example, you have a violation code, you have an issue date, you have the host number and the street and description and so on. Okay. Here we can see the column names. I guess it's not new for you. And okay, So the first thing that you want to know about a data set when you are cleaning it is basically you want to know how many null values or how many missing values are in the data set. Okay. If you just look at these first 5 rows that we demonstrate here, you can see that, for example, here for the second row for the device number, there is no value actually, and it's just the pandas is showing NaN, which means that there is a missing value in this. There's a missing value here. So this could be due to many reasons. But what is important for us is that for the device number, our second sample, well, for our second sample, we don't have any value for device number. Again, you see again here the same for the third sample, or here the description is missing. So there could be many, I mean, for many samples, some of these features are actually missing. So we have to deal with them, because sometimes these features are important for our analysis, or if we want to train a machine learning model, for example, these features could be important. So if you want to see how many of these null values or how many of these missing values do you have in total in your data set, you can use a method in pandas which is called isNull. Okay, so what isNull does is basically it detects missing values. Okay, but if you just run isNull itself, okay, it returns a data frame of Boolean values, and each and for each data value, which is okay, and for each data value for a row and a column, if you have false, this means that there is actually a value here, and this is not null. But if you have true, for example, here and here, this means that in this position you have a missing value or you have a null value. But if you want to know how many null values are in total in each column, all you have to do is that you have to do isNull, and then you have to do .sum to just sum all of these false true values. Okay. And by doing so, you can see how many null values are in each column in total. So for example, you can see that in device number column, we have almost 5,000 null values. And in the last 3 columns, in the disposition date, the disposition comments, and HTV number, there are actually a lot of null values. Okay. So knowing that, maybe, yeah. So knowing that is really insightful, because it gives you an idea of how many null values are in your data set. Probably if there's a column which has a lot of null values, you just want to get rid of it. For example, these last 3 columns, you just want to get rid of them because they are not really informative. Most of the values there are just missing. Which gives you the importance of dropping some of the columns that you don't want to use. And you can do it easily in pandas. All you have to do is that you have to make a list of the columns that you want to drop or you want to delete. And then you can just use the dropped method in pandas. So when you do df.drop, here you give the list of the columns that you want to delete, and then you should specify the axis. Okay. Note that when we have a pandas data frame, the axis 0 represents the rows, and the axis 1 represents the columns. So when I want to remove or delete a column from my data frame, I should set axis equal to 1. Okay. So that's why I have axis equal to 1 here. Another important attribute is this in place attribute. As I said, most of the operations in pandas are not in place. So if I just don't set in place equal to true, the changes will not be applied on the DF data frame. And because I want the changes to be applied on DF, I just set in place equal to true. So by running this cell, these columns will be dropped. And if I just run df.columns again, I will see that I only have the, so I will see that the other columns are remaining in the data frame, but these columns have been removed, okay? Another method for just getting insight of the.
I guess it is interesting also here, you know, like, I mean, the data frame is changing automatically, right?
Well, it's not, I mean, you are changing it actually. What do you mean by automatically?
I mean, before, you know, we just the data equal to data dot drop kind of things.
Ah,
But
okay. These two are the same. So either I could have done, you know, df equal to df dot drop, you know, without in place, or I can just do df dot drop. Oh, sorry. I can just do df dot drop and set in place equal to true. These are the same.
okay, I see. So
You
the
see?
in place is the keyword here, huh?
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
attribute. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Khaled.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then the descriptive statistic is just something that you can just call on a data frame, and it gives you some insight of the data frame, you know, about some statistics of the data frame. So these statistics are usually numerical statistics. So as you can see, when I just run this describe, it will just show me the results for the two columns, which seem to be numerical columns. Later on, you will see that these two columns are also not actually numerical because the date is actually not a number, and also bin is not a number. It's mostly an identifier of a house. Anyhow, but if you have real numerical columns in your data frame, here you can see how many values are there, what is the mean, what is the standard deviation, and what are the 25%, 50, and 75% quartiles of your data frame. Another important thing that may be wrong when you load a data set are actually the data types. So here, sometimes when you load a data frame, you expect a column to be of a date time type or a column to be a numerical type. But when you just load the data frame, you will see that pandas have assigned all of the columns as object data type. So you may want to correct this. So for example, here, if I just do df.data types, the d types, I can see the data types of my columns. And here you can see that, for example, the issue date is an integer, has been inferred to be an integer column, which is wrong. Or this number column is inferred as object, which could be wrong. We don't know, but we should maybe look at this column to see if this is really a numerical column or not. So you may want to change these data types. So let's start with this issue date. So for the date, we know for sure that this should not be an integer. Okay, it should be in a date time format. And in pandas, we have a specific format for date and time. So we want to convert this column to have that format, to have that data type. Here you can see that the issue date, the dates are in this format. So they are just, consecutive digits. So probably the first 4 digits indicate the year, and then you have the month, and then you have the day. But we want to convert it to a real date format. And this is really easy in pandas because there's already a method to do that, which is called toDateTime. And by just using pandas.toDateTime and applying it on the issue date column, we get a column which is of date time type, and we get proper, we get proper dates in our issue date column. Okay. Yeah. Here probably you should Okay. But here, probably you can see that the results are not quite correct, you see, because the dates have been, so that when I just converted the data type to be to the date time type, I get the date for 1970, which is definitely not correct. The reason is that pandas couldn't do the job correctly and could not identify this format of date. So what we have to do is that we have to specify this date time format so that pandas can convert this basically that can convert this format to a proper date format. Okay, for that, there is an attribute into datetime, which is called format, okay. And if you just look at the documentation, okay, the format string basically is used to parse the time, okay. So I need to find a correct parser here, which is probably, okay, I will go with, okay, it did not do it correctly again. Okay, I should look into it later because I did not change it the time. So, well, I did not check the format before the class, so maybe it's better not to search for it right now because it may take time. But just for you to know is that so sometimes if you just do date time and then give the column, pandas can correctly convert it to a proper date time. But here it couldn't do it because I guess what it has inferred is that these are timestamps, and because timestamps are usually in nanoseconds, so this is actually a very small timestamp. And in the pandas convention, the timestamps starts from the first day of 1970. So that's why all of the days are in 1970. So with the format attribute, you can actually tell pandas that, look, this is not a timestamp. This is basically the first 4 digits are the year, and there's the month and the day. And if you just give it the correct format, it can just convert the column to a datetime format correctly. So I will just look into it later and then maybe post it in a Slack with the proper format, okay? Because it may take time right now. Okay, another data type conversion that could come handy is basically converting a column which is supposed to be numerical to an actual numerical data type. So here I chose house number column. This does not mean that house numbers should be definitely numerical, because they could be integer or a mix of integer and digits. But this is I'm just doing it for the sake of an example. So that's all of the reason. So so when I want to convert a column to a numerical data type, I can use the toNumeric method from pandas. And when I do pd.toNumeric and then give the column, which is supposed to be converted to numerical data type, then the job is done like this. And when I do it right now, I will get an error actually. And the error tells me that, okay, there is a value in this column, which has this format. So it's like 32 hyphen then 14. And it tells me, okay, I cannot parse this value to a numerical value or to an integer. Okay. Okay, and this tells us that okay, not all of the values in this column, you know, all of the values in this column are not digits. So there could be some, you know, characters or string values in this column. Okay. But in the case that you're sure that this column should be a numerical column, and if there is like a value in this column which is not all digits and numbers, there is a mistake or something, what you can do is that you can deal with this error by just ignoring these kind of errors. Okay, so if I just do the same thing, but this time I set the error attribute to this, I don't know how to pronounce it, but then this means that whenever pandas reaches a value which it cannot parse it to a numerical value, it just ignores this error. Okay, and set that value to be null. Okay, to again if we just to that NaN that we saw in the data frame before. So if I run this again right now, I do not get any error. Okay, but here I can see that I got some null values in the house number column, which is basically because I converted its data type to numerical, and then pandas couldn't convert probably some of the values to numerical value, and then just replace them with null values. So that's why I'm getting some null values in this column right now. Okay. So knowing this, another important step in data cleaning is dealing with null values. So there are plenty of different ways of dealing with null values. So sometimes you want to just remove them completely. Sometimes you want to replace them with some specific value. So here we just review two specific cases. The first case is that when I want to replace the null values in a column by the mean or the median of the values in that column. Okay. So for example, suppose that you have a numerical column in your data frame and some of the values are just missing in that column. So you just want to replace those values with the mean of the other values in the column. Okay. And the second case we will consider is just removing the data samples that have some null features or null columns. So for the first case, if I want to replace the null values in a column with the mean value, I can just, or any other value actually, I can use the fill_NA method of pandas. Okay. So here again, suppose that for the house number column that we converted to numerical data types. So now we want to replace the null values with the mean of the other numbers in the column. So all I have to do is that I have to say, okay, just I just use the fill_NA and I say, okay, fill the missing values with the mean of the column, and I want this operation to be in place. Okay. And now if I just again do df that is null dot sum, I see that I don't have any more null values in the house number column. And for the second case, if you want to just remove the rows with null features, you can just use the method in pandas called drop_NA. And drop_NA just drop all of the rows or columns that contain null value. So here, because I want to remove the rows that contain null values, I set the axis equal to 0. And again, I do this operation in place. After doing that, because I had this device number column, which had actually a significant number of null values. So if I just get the shape of my data frame, I can see that I only have 5,200 rows in my data frame. That's because I had almost 4,700 rows with null values So by drop NA, all of these rows have been removed. So only this number of rows are remaining right now. Another conversion that can come handy is basically converting a column to have a categorical type. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with categorical feature, but a categorical feature is basically a feature, or well, I'm just using the word feature and column interchangeably. So, but they're the same. The categorical feature is a feature which actually takes values from a given set. So, for example, let's say we have a feature which is called violation code, and we only have 5 different violation code. It's either A, B, C, or D, or E. Okay. So this column is actually a categorical column because the values it takes is only among a given set of 5 different violation codes, which is A, B, C, D, E. Okay. So here we have a violation type code in our data frame, and this column is most probably a categorical column. And if I want to convert this to have the categorical data type, I can use as type method and then pass category as an attribute, which basically converts my column to have categorical data type. So here, before doing that, I can see that the violation type code has this object data type. So it's just some strings. But then after doing this, I can see that pandas now recognizes it as a categorical column. So the data type is equal to category, and it can recognize that there are 13 different categories in this column. So and these categories are basically different violation codes. So ACC1, ACH1, these are basically different violation codes. And depending on what you're doing with your, depending on your problem, this conversion could be useful because sometimes it's important for you. Sometimes it's important for you. The categorical columns are important for you. For example, when you are training a machine learning model in your data frame, it's important to know that a column is a categorical column. And maybe you want to deal with each category separately or something like this. So depending on the application, this operation can be very useful. And the last thing I wanted to review in this notebook is changing a column name, which is fairly easy. So there's a rename method in pandas. So by basically doing the df.rename, you can specify which column names you want to change, and you can just put them in a dictionary. So basically, I have created a dictionary, and where the key is issue date and the value is date, and this means that I want to change the issue date column to date. So and this just changes the column name. And again, I want to do this operation in place. So when I do it and I do df.head, I can see that no, there is no issue date column and it has been converted to date. Okay. Yeah. So that's all of the cleaning operations that we did on our data set. Okay, it's already 5:30, so maybe. Okay, does anyone have any question? Probably. Okay, maybe I don't want this session to be too long because you may get bored with the online session and so on. So there is only one. Maybe I can just quickly explain these notebooks in this folder, and then you can just do it at home. So basically, these 4 notebooks are about how to select subsets of the data frame. We review it a little bit in these 2 notebooks that we just reviewed together. I mean, with that .look and .ilook, we reviewed together. But there are also other ways of selecting and filtering your data frame. There are like Boolean indexing or other ways of selecting a subset of the data frame. So these notebooks are very in detail. So I'm sure by just reviewing them, you get most of the skills and the knowledge of pandas that would be useful for you. So yeah, I just review them and review the exercises. And at the end of each notebook, there is also some exercises as well. Okay, and you can do the exercises on your own. But the solution to the exercises are in a separate notebook. So when you're just done with these exercises, you can also check the solution to see if you have done the things correctly or not. Okay. And as I said, the notebooks look very long, but the reason is that there are a lot of explanations, and then they're really step by step. So I mean, it just seems to be very long, but if you just want to review it and run the cells, and I mean, my point is that you can review them fairly quickly, because they're just very step by step, but these steps are not really hard. So I guess you can just review them quickly. But I would say that also don't skip them. So try to review them at home, because pandas is something that you will use in almost every project and assignment. So I mean, every project and assignment contains a data set that you're going to work on, and you have to basically load that data set and clean it and do some pre-processing on that. So all of this should be done with pandas. So it's important to be skilled with pandas. Okay, I don't want to, yeah, I guess that's it for today from my side, unless if there are any questions from you, we can close the session. So does anybody have any question?
Hi there. My name is Diana. I'm one of the students. I just wanted to know, are we going to have to form groups for this class? Because I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, for the project, for the final project.
And by when do we have to form these groups, and how are we?
So if you just see the course page in Moodle, I don't know why it's not. Okay, so the project will be released on November 9th, okay? And probably by that time, I guess you should form your group already. Does this answer your question?
And how many people are in a group?
So,
A group of how many people?
So I think it's maybe 4 or 3. Yeah. But it's not decided yet, but it's either 3 or 4. And yeah. But then there are also 2 graded assignments in the course, which are just individual assignments. So only the project is a group project. And I also wrote on a Slack that there were a couple of people who wanted to have an extension for the date for selecting that book on a Slack. So I have already done it. So you can do it until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. actually. So the deadline right now is 9 a.m. of tomorrow.
And since we're talking about these admin things, what is the deadline for submitting the assignment related to the book?
Related to the book, I'm not really sure because that assignment was actually, prepared by the professor. So I'm not really sure how is the deadline with that. So because I just prepared the stuff for the assignments, for the graded assignments and the final project, but I was not really aware of the assignment which is related to the book, because I think the books are for you to read them during the semester, but I'm not really aware if there is an assignment for that or no, and how is the assignment and when is the deadline of that. So yeah, I'm not really sure of that.
Okay, then maybe, I don't know, could you find out until next time, or shall we ask a question in Slack, or what's the better way of finding out?
Maybe if you can just ask the question in Slack, would be better.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, we try to answer the questions on Slack. Yeah, sometimes if you see we miss something, you can also do private messaging, because in general channel there are lots of messages, so maybe sometimes we miss something,
All right, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. And if there are no more questions, I can just close that session and wish you a nice cloudy afternoon. Okay, you're welcome. I'm not sure if a cloudy afternoon is nice or not, but anyway, have a good time. See you, talk to you next week.